Welcome everyone. Thanks for coming early this morning after the lawn party. I hope everyone had a good time last night. My name is Megan Crone, and welcome to my session on how Palo Alto Networks built a high-speed enrichment engine. I am currently the Senior Manager of MarTech and Integrations at Palo Alto Networks, and for those of you who haven't heard of the company, we're in the cybersecurity space. So just a little bit about me before we dive in. I am a 3-time Marketo champion, a Marketo certified expert, and I have more than 10 years of experience in marketing operations. So I've definitely been in the trenches with all of you guys. So by a show of hands, how many of you are manually loading lists to your marketing automation platform today, and you have an agency or a team of people that's loading lists? Raise your hand. Definitely a lot of people. And how many people are managing multiple enrichment vendors, multiple contracts, different vendors? Perfect. So hopefully this session brings you some value, but we had a similar challenge at Palo Alto Networks. We had a speed to lead challenge because we were doing all of this manual list loading. We actually had a team of people who was manually scrubbing spreadsheets, formatting lists, uploading them into our marketing automation platform, and it really just wasn't a great and efficient use of time. So it was really slowing down our process and our speed to lead, because I'm sure many of you can relate to, by the time a list gets to the marketing operations team, you already have people slacking you, asking you where their leads are from their event. So that was definitely an area for improvement for us. We also really needed to improve our enrichment process and make sure we are optimizing it as much as possible. We are using multiple point enrichment vendors, and they all had different data formats. We had some coming into custom fields in our marketing automation platform. We had some going into our standard fields, and it wasn't as optimized as it could be, especially making sure we were showcasing the correct data to our sales teams and our BDRs. And ultimately, we just really wanted to make sure we are getting leads to our sales teams faster and more efficiently. So, of course, speed to lead isn't optional. You want to make sure that you're present when the buyer is ready, and any delay can really cause stale leads, and they could potentially go to a competitor. So in today's landscape, every second counts. Our challenge, like I was mentioning, we were doing very manual list loading, which wasn't efficient. And we also had a very fragmented enrichment workflow. This had a negative impact on sales. It was actually slowing them down before they can even act, causing missed opportunity. So my goal throughout this presentation is to showcase how we solved this problem. So there was 2 things we really wanted to tackle when we were building our new high-powered and high-speed enrichment engine. We knew we needed smarter enrichment workflows. We needed to be able to measure how effective our enrichment was. A lot of the point vendors we were working with, they were having us build our own reports. It was extremely manual. I was actually told oftentimes to, take the number of leads that you guys are sending to the enrichment provider and divide it by how many actually returned a value. So it was extremely manual, and reporting was very difficult for us. But of course, as most marketing operations professionals are, we are really accountable for showing ROI of all of the vendors that we are using. So reporting was extremely difficult for us. And we also knew we needed to automate our list upload process. We had an agency team that was uploading lists every day, and it wasn't efficient. Of course, there's a lot of room for human error in that process. They were in spreadsheets, formatting data, cleaning it up, taking the list, loading it to Marketo in our case, and then therefore syncing it to Salesforce. And it was a very lengthy process, and we really needed our process to be more intelligent and more efficient. So now I'm going to deep dive into how we actually fixed the process and built our high-speed enrichment engine. So there's a couple best practices and key considerations we are looking at when trying to come up with a vendor or a collective set of vendors to solve this problem. So some of the questions that we were asking ourselves were, what type of coverage do we need? As we were exploring different enrichment vendors, we found that a lot of the different enrichment vendors, they had different strengths. So there are some enrichment vendors that were stronger in US data. There are some enrichment vendors that were stronger in international data. And we really wanted the best of both worlds, but we couldn't manage hundreds of different enrichment vendors. We really wanted them to be more consolidated. And then next, we wanted to make sure that the data that was coming in from the vendors was accurate. Like, there's definitely some cases where vendors would provide data that was conflicting from each other, and we really needed that orchestration engine to help us determine what is the best value. We didn't want one value to really win over the other. We wanted sound logic behind it to make sure we are providing accurate information to our sales team. We didn't want to send them anything without it being verified. And then we needed to understand how we were going to move the data around. Were we going to create custom fields in Marketo, custom fields in Salesforce, and pass it back and forth, and how we were really going to keep those in sync. And finally, we needed to be able to demonstrate ROI of all of the vendors that we were working with. So with that, we decided to go with Openprise to help solve this challenge, because they have the ability to do an enrichment waterfall approach, and they also have the data orchestration layer. So something super unique about them is they can clean your data. For example, if you have phone number formats that are incorrect, or the brackets are in the wrong place, or there's too many digits in the phone number, they can clean it up as much as possible before sending it to the enrichment vendor to provide better match rates. So when we were using a single vendor, our match rate was around 50 to 60%. And then when we implemented the waterfall approach with Openprise, we improved our match rate to above 85%. So it was super awesome. We weren't having to manage all of these different contracts, all of these different vendors, different data formats. We were able to consolidate everything and improve our match rate. So this here is an example of the waterfall approach that we use at Palo Alto Networks. So we have a number of different vendors in this order, and each vendor we recognize has different strengths. So we have implemented this approach, and when you send a lead into the waterfall, something super unique about Openprise is once you match all of the required fields that you set in place for a lead, so we have minimum required fields that we want to enrich. Once those are filled in, it will stop in the waterfall, and it will send that lead over to sales as quickly as possible. So we're not sending every single lead through every single vendor because it is credit-based, and we want to make sure we're making the most efficient use of all of the credits that we have. We actually stop it as soon as we hit our required fields, and then we are passing it to the sales team immediately because we don't want to delay or slow down our process. So you can see here, all of the vendors have different strengths, but with this waterfall methodology, we are able to usually get around an 85% match rate, and all of our minimum required fields are filled in on the lead, which is super awesome, and we get a lot of positive feedback from our sales and BDR teams. So as I was kind of mentioning before, when we are using a single vendor, we are only enriching around half or a little bit less of the leads that were coming through. So this was leaving huge gaps, and we were getting a lot of feedback from the BDRs that they were having to do a lot of manual work. They were having to go into other platforms to get that information, and it wasn't ideal. We wanted to make sure we are giving them as much information as we could up front so they didn't have to go look for it. And if you're using a single vendor, you're really stuck with whatever that one vendor provides, and that's really all they have, so it wasn't as ideal. But when we implemented the waterfall approach and we are using between 2 and 5 vendors for every single lead, our match rate significantly improved. And we are also able to combine the best of each vendor and have better enrichment for our sales team. We are also able to clean the data before we are sending it to each of the enrichment providers because each one has different strengths, whether it be like better international coverage, better account coverage, et cetera. So implementing the multi-vendor waterfall was a huge efficiency gain for us. And then finally, we didn't want to just feel like our enrichment was working. We actually needed to prove it was working. We needed to prove ROI. So we actually were able to create custom reports in Openprise. This is just a sample set of data that I pulled. But essentially, with Openprise, you're able to create unique reports. You're able to pull in custom fields from your marketing automation platform. So for example, this report shows our enrichment rate by our personas that we care about. So we're making sure that we have the most in-depth metrics that we can, but we're also able to report out on enrichment rate by region, by geo. We're able to not just see our overall match rate. Like a lot of the vendors, it's kind of like a black box, and they don't really want to expose everything to you, I feel like oftentimes. So with Openprise, it's very transparent. You're able to see the enrichment rates by region, by geo, or any way you want to slice and dice it. In our case, we also look at personas as well. And this, of course, helps us optimize our waterfall. It also helps us look at the different vendors and negotiate different contracts as well. And now I'm going to dive into our automated list ingestion process. So as I was mentioning before, our list upload process was extremely manual. It was very painful. The marketing team, we support global campaigns, so we were receiving hundreds of lists per week, and then we had a team of agency team members who were going in every day. They were cleaning Excel files. They were doing all of this manual work, and as much as they were using macros and trying to format the data as best and efficiently as they can, it was definitely still a big blocker, and they were spending so much time doing it. Additionally, there was tons of human error in the process. So if they accidentally deleted columns off of a spreadsheet, which we saw sometimes, or they mapped fields incorrectly, it just wasn't great, and it was definitely error prone. And if they made mistakes and they were loading the list to Marketo, we would often have to go back and kind of fix our whole process. So it was very tedious and very manual, just making sure the right data was getting to the right spot. So we use Openprise to solve this problem, and this is a screenshot of how our list ingestion portal looks like in Openprise. But essentially, as you can see here, all you have to do with Openprise is grab the file, upload it into your list ingestion portal, which is shown here. Openprise automatically maps all of the different fields that you have in the file, and the process kicks off. It loads it to Marketo, and then it triggers the sync to Salesforce, our CRM. And something super cool about this process as well with Openprise is there's a lot of custom columns on this report, and you can see if there are any errors on your spreadsheet that you're uploading, it will return and spit out where it's broken. So we've definitely had cases where maybe email was in the wrong column or something like that. It will spit out where the error is to go back and fix it. So our team essentially, now that we have the automated list ingestion portal, is just fixing the errors, but they're not having to manually clean up all of their Excel spreadsheets. And the columns on here are completely customizable as well. So if you want to see where your process stops or is breaking, you can see how successful the leads are at getting into Marketo, getting into your CRM, so on and so forth. But this portal allows us not to have to manually scrub and clean all of our lists, which is very tedious. So in terms of adoption training, when we are using an agency, we wanted to make the transition process as easy and as simplified as possible. So with the portal, it's super easy. There's really no training involved. They just had to know how to upload the file into the portal, and Openprise automatically mapped all the fields for them. So it was a lot easier, and there was a lot less margin for error. So the agency just grabs the file, uploads it into the Openprise portal, and then it triggers the sync to happen magically. So now after the marketing team is still receiving hundreds of lists per week that we're uploading into our marketing automation platform, but now all the agency has to do is grab the list, put it into the portal, and everything kind of happens behind the scenes, which is super nice. And now our agency resources are able to shift into more strategic work, and they're not having to manually clean all of these spreadsheets, and it honestly saves us hundreds of hours per week because our volume was so high and they were spending so much time cleaning up manual data in Excel. It saved us tons of time and just helped us be more efficient and get our leads to sales faster. So some key takeaways from my session are work smarter, not harder. If you have an extremely manual list upload process like we did, definitely look for opportunities to automate the process as much as you possibly can. It will help save time, and it will help reduce the margin of error. Make sure you are optimizing your enrichment strategy if you're using a bunch of different vendors, managing a bunch of different data formats, a bunch of different enrichment vendor contracts as we were. See if there's room for consolidation. It helps you cut costs, and it also helps you to make sure your data strategy is as efficient as possible. And finally, set realistic expectations with your sales teams. It's definitely important for them to understand where the data is coming from. I know often we get a lot of questions like, oh, where did this information come from? Definitely make sure that they're aware of that the data that they're providing is coming from an enrichment source, or if it's first-party data, that kind of thing. And that is it for me, so I'm happy to take any questions that anyone may have. Push it out to the marketing stakeholders? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. For us, it was about bandwidth. Like our events team and our marketing stakeholders, they are very busy, and we're a global team. So one, it was about just like capacity and the with the amount we get, because we were getting hundreds of lists a week. And I think another thing was making sure that like we didn't want it to be a free-for-all. Like we had very strict processes that we wanted the team to follow. So by having it all centralized under the marketing operations team, we can make sure the data is coming in how we want it and it's structured how we want it.
Thanks for the session. This was great.
Yeah.
It sounds like the entry point when you're doing the automated list upload is Openprise, then on to Marketo, then Salesforce. When you're doing the enrichment waterfall, is it Marketo, and then do you wait for Openprise to do its thing before going to Salesforce, or do you allow it to initially sync and then enrichment can follow after the fact?
Yeah, so it comes into Marketo first, and then in our case, we're adding a bunch of leads onto a list that we want to send over to Openprise. So we use the API, it picks it up, it's sending it over to Openprise, and it's enriching the lead. It's going to as many vendors as it needs to until our minimum required fields are complete on a lead, and then it's passing it back to Marketo as quickly as possible. If it takes like 1 or 2 vendors, we stop there and send it immediately back. So the process is faster and we're not waiting for like 5 or 6 vendors to kind of like enrich the lead. And also we would be wasting our credits if we did that. So we send it to as few vendors as possible and then sync it back to Marketo, and then Marketo syncs it to Salesforce.
And while that's all happening, are you like preventing any other sync to Salesforce, like to a
Yeah.
Salesforce campaign or whatever?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
We are. It's a pretty fast process, usually within minutes, sometimes longer if we are sending it to a bunch of different vendors, but it is a pretty quick like handoff process.
This was super helpful. So you said you guys have Jira as your ticketing system, right?
Yeah.
So are your marketers entering everything in Jira, and from there, how are the tickets being created if this is automated?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we are still, the team is submitting all of their list uploads through Jira. We want to be able to like track the volume, and we have SLAs and stuff like that. So we are still using Jira, and then that's where the agency is coming in. They're just grabbing the file from Jira and uploading it into the Openprise portal. But we actually are looking into potentially automating that and grabbing the file automatically from Jira and uploading it directly to Openprise.
Thank you.
Have you integrated this with any event platforms like Cvent?
We have Cvent integrate. We do have an integration with like some of our event platforms, like Cvent on 24. They're actually pushing the leads directly into Marketo, and then the process is triggering off. So where we have integrations, I know it sounds like a large volume. I'm like, we're getting hundreds of files a week, but we have as many like native integrations as we can set up. And that way the leads are coming into Marketo, so we can trigger all of these processes and then getting synced to Salesforce.
This is super helpful, thank you. I had a quick question regarding the enrichment waterfall. So at our company, we're using ZoomInfo and Cognizant, and so I was just kind of curious, with having like 5 enrichment providers, how often are you seeing some of those contacts hitting like that 4th or 5th vendor? Like, what's that contract look like?
It definitely depends on the information that we're sending to them. I find that the more data and information you have, like company name, email, first name, the better, of course, the match rate is. The ones where maybe like we're missing a lot of information or we have a personal email address, sometimes it is going down further and further, but we do find that most of them are only hitting like the first 2. Sometimes only even 1. Like ZoomInfo has really strong US data, and Cognizant has more strengths like internationally, so sometimes it's really only hitting those 2. But yeah, there's definitely more unique scenarios if we're missing required fields or we have like personal email addresses.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, it was really helpful. So I just wanted to know, even we use Openprise for enrichment and they are doing really great. However, the only challenge that maybe we have not still explored on Openprise is when there is a misalignment on the information. For example, in the last name column, say for example, the marketeers would have submitted company name. Will Openprise will be able to detect that?
So in our case, when we have first-party data, we don't override it. We have custom fields that syncs in like the data that's from the enrichment provider because we don't want to override what they had. But if 2 vendors provide conflicting information, we're definitely taking note of that, and we're looking at like how accurate the vendor has been in the past. We have like feedback loops from BDRs as well to say like, hey, this was like inaccurate data. So they're telling us when it was wrong, and then we're taking that feedback back into consideration when we're using our vendors. And a lot of the times too, sometimes if there's unique scenarios, we'll reach out to the individual vendors and be like, hey, where did you get this information, to kind of like dive in a little bit deeper there.
Okay, thank you.
On your feedback loop that you just talked about, I was actually going to ask about that. How are you re-enriching after it happens, and like how fast is that process?
Yeah, so if the lead goes to a BDR and they're like, hey, this is like invalid contact information or it's not right, we will try to enrich it and send it back through the waterfall. Sometimes I will find like they will have, like they'll make a change on the record sometimes, like they'll have like an updated job title or something like that, which actually improves the match rate. But we try to have the feedback loop and we try to re-enrich it where we can.
Thank you.